Welcome to Peachtree Injury Talk with attorney Jordan Jewkes.
Welcome back to Peachtree Injury Talk with Jordan Jewkes. Jordan strives to give injured victims a voice and provide strong advocacy against an often broken system. As a seasoned trial lawyer and former insurance defense attorney, Jordan now uses that insider knowledge to fight for injury victims all across Georgia. I'm Evan Mack, and today we're talking about something that every parent hopes they never need to know. What do you do if your child is injured in an accident, and how the legal process works when minors are involved? Welcome back, Jordan.
Hey, thanks again for having me, and it is always a pleasure.
Absolutely. This episode is protecting your kids, what parents need to know after a child is injured in an accident. I'm sure this is something that's a little harder for people to talk about, parents to talk about, and even to think about a child getting injured, but there's certain things that they need to know and valuable information, Jordan. So like if you can help them out along the way, I think it'll be very valuable to them. So if a child is injured in a car crash or fall on someone's property, how is that different legally than like, let's say you or me getting hurt?
Well, from the outset, we hope this never happens, right?
Absolutely.
And parents can always do everything they can to keep their children safe, to make sure they're in, a seatbelt or a car seat if we're talking about cars. And parents, I know I am a parent of 4 kids. I do everything I can whenever I'm in the car. I mean, I yell at my youngest all the time, put your seatbelt on. We're not driving down the street until your seatbelt's on. Right. And so making sure that you're doing everything you can to keep your kids safe is the most important thing. But unfortunately, even when we do everything we can to keep our kids safe, bad things still happen. And we can't control the actions of other people. And sometimes our children get injured, and that's an unfortunate thing. I would say the most important thing you probably need to be aware of is, well, several things. The law is a little bit different when it comes to a child's injury claim versus just someone who is over the age of 18. And let me say this as well. Under the law in Georgia and in most states, a person who is under the age of 18 is considered a child, right? Or a minor, even if they're a teenager or something like that, but they're considered a minor under the law with limited capacity to do things. And we can probably talk a little bit about that. So anyone over the 18, regardless of whether they're 80 or whether they're just 18, are considered an adult. And so we're talking really about claims or what to do, when a minor, someone under the age of 18 is injured. And so I would say the main thing to be aware of is that the law changes a little bit with regard to when that claim can be brought. And I don't want to get too detailed here, Evan, but you should know that in general, if a child is injured, they have, well, let me say this. Under the law in Georgia, when an adult is injured, someone who's 18 or older, they have 2 years to bring a claim. Right, 2 years from the date of injury to bring a claim. So that means a claim for their pain and suffering, the claim for their medical bills, for their lost wages, all those types of things. It's a little different for minors. If you're injured and you're under the age, and there's again some exceptions to this, but if you're under the age of 17 or younger, you don't have to bring your claim until 2 years after you turn 18, if that makes sense. So your claim doesn't begin to run, or the statute of limitations doesn't begin to run until you've turned 18 and then add on 2 years. So really until you're 20. There are some exceptions to that. And one of the major ones is the parents or the person responsible, maybe it's a guardian, but the parents or the guardian, whoever's responsible for the medical bills of that child, still has 2 years from the date of injury to bring the claim for medical bills. So let me give you an example, because I know that's kind of tricky there. If Evan, you got in a car wreck, and Evan, you're over 18, right? Just kidding, man. If you get in a car wreck, and you spend $10,000 on medical bills to get better, you better bring that. You either better settle it or bring that claim within 2 years of that car wreck, or it doesn't matter what happens. The insurance company doesn't have to pay you, right? That's what we call the 2-year statute of limitations. With minors is different. So Evan, let's say you've got a 5-year-old son who is injured in a car wreck, and you pay $10,000 for his bills. Here's what you need to know. you need to bring a claim for your $5,000 within 2 years of that car wreck, or $10,000, whatever the amount of bills are. But technically, the other claim there is the injury to your son, right? If he's 5 years old, he does not need to bring that claim until he is 20, really, 2 years after he turns 18. He still, that claim still is alive and viable. But practically speaking, you should just bring them both. So what we're talking about is the claim for the parents' money, and then the claim for the pain and suffering and the future injury to the child. Those are two different claims. One needs to be within 2 years. The other one doesn't even begin to run until they turn 18. So it's 2 years after they turn 18. I know that was convoluted, Evan, and I apologize for that, but that's sort of the basics when we're talking about injuries to children.
But are there limits on the types of compensation children can receive for injuries like, pain and suffering, or maybe that emotional trauma that goes with an injury, especially something at such a young age?
Yeah, I mean, the law applies to them basically the same, which is in terms of their bodily injuries or the injuries to their mental health, which are very viable claims, very good claims. The law is written essentially the same, that you can recover for present, past, future pain, right? So the moment after the impact, all the pain and suffering, until you are quote unquote, healed, you can do that. And if it's a permanent injury, you can claim, hey, my son is never going to be healed, or my daughter is always going to have this issue. And so I argue always that an injury to a child has much more value because of the years ahead of them than an injury to an adult, or especially an 80-year-old adult who maybe has a limited time here on earth. Because that child, when they're under 18, they're still looking at 60 years minimum, 70, 80. And if they lose a finger or have a mental, injury, a brain injury, they're never going to return. And so you're talking about 60, 70, 80 years of having to deal with that. And when they turn 80, they're still going to think about this car wreck that they were in when they were 5 or 10.
Mhm.
And before, they were perfectly able to play baseball and throw a ball with their dad, and now they can't.
Right.
So I would argue that the claims to children are actually worth a whole lot more than claims to a lot of adults, if not all adults. And think about it this way as well, Evan. A child loves playing baseball with their dad, or throwing a football, and they get an injury to their arm.
Right.
Not only can they not just play with their dad, which is important both to the dad and the child, but now what sort of career options are they limited to? Right. And so we represented someone at one point who said who had a very significant hand injury, a child, and that one of the child's ambitions, without giving too much detail about the case, was to be a pilot. And and a very significant nerve injury to their hand, I think, diminishes the likelihood that they will be picked or qualify to be an Air Force pilot, right? Because you're and so, hey, my hopes and dreams, I was hoping to be a pilot like my dad or my uncle, who was a World War II, or decorated, and now I can't, right? And so I think of this as, well, now you have a limitation on that, your life pursuits, your life, liberty, and happiness, because of the negligence of someone else. I think there's a lot of value to that. So it's perspective, really, but that's one of the things you consider when you're dealing with a minor who's been injured.
So what happens to any money awarded to the child? You know what I mean? Can the parents access it? Is it held until the kid turns 18? Because if we're talking about something that, now we're getting into a different kind of topic, but money is settled. This is still a kid that's under 18 years old. They don't really have a bank account. Like, so how does that work?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. And there are several different ways to go about that. But let me start off by saying this. The law and the public policy in Georgia and in most states is that we want the child to enjoy as much of that money as they can, because they're the ones who ultimately suffered the physical or the mental injury, right? And what we don't want, and this doesn't happen very often, but you can imagine a scenario it would. We don't want an unscrupulous parent, or guardian, just, hey, look, my kid was very severely injured. got $100,000 or $1 million, and we're going to go to Disney, and I'm going to gamble that money away at, the casino, on the reservation or whatever it is, or go to Vegas. Right. And so, and then next thing I know, that money's gone. That shouldn't happen. And if that happens, that's almost a travesty worse than the injury itself, because now that kid has been robbed twice, really. So the law has put into place certain safeguards to make sure that doesn't happen, even with parents who are just the best and well-intentioned parents in the world. So there's a couple different things. In Georgia, I'll speak specifically to Georgia, there's a minimum threshold of $25,000 where if that's the settlement, then the parents can keep that money without, having a whole lot of safeguards in place. But usually above that number, the law requires several different options, but there's going to be basically a reporting or a sort of some sort of trust system set in place where the parents have to invest that money or report it to the courts where they spend it. And this gets kind of complicated because there's so many different ways you can do it. But in essence, the court will help you or require you to set up some sort of vehicle, right? Some investment or trust vehicle, some sort of established method that allows you to set the bulk of that money aside. So the kid gets it sometimes during increments when they turn 18 or maybe 25, and then an amount of money for every year after that, or for 5 years after that, they get a certain amount of that money depending on the size of the money. So that when the kid has reached the age of majority, 18, and then maybe has a couple of years on top of that to sort of mature, they're not getting that $100,000 lump sum and just spending it, right? But then sometimes you can put it towards a college trust or tuition. But usually by the time a kid is 25, they either want the money or they're smart enough to do something on it with their own. And so the courts will say, hey, look, if the kid is 5 years old, put it in this sort of vehicle that needs to be approved by the court so the parents aren't tempted with it. Even again, well-meaning parents. And that vehicle, it's called an annuity, right? It earns interest over time. And so you put $100,000 in there and it'll pay out your child, $150,000 or some amount similar to that by the time they turn, 25 or 22 or something like that. And so it's really, really important if you're getting an amount close to or over $25,000 to really talk to an attorney about, hey, maybe a financial advisor, and there's a lot of different options, insurance instruments that allow you to be able to put things in safe places that'll be approved by the court. You want the court to give their stamp of approval on that, and they have to if it's over $25,000 to really protect the child, but also to protect the parents. You don't want parents having all that cash and then saying, well, we're short this month.
Yep.
Or being tempted to go to Disney one too many times. So
Yep. So what if the at-fault party is a family friend or a relative? Can the child still file a claim without creating a conflict or a rift between the family?
Well, I mean, that's another thing, but technically, yes. We've had cases, quite a number, where family member went to Aunt Edna's house, and Aunt Edna's bulldog got a little too excited and bit into the child, right? That's unfortunate, but it happens. Or like the neighborhood dog, 99% of the time it's a good dog, but when you reach down to get its bone, it bites you. And often our children, and who are the most well-meaning, reach down to pet a dangerous dog or a dog that's, sometimes what happens is, the nice neighborhood family invites kids over to do something fun, but they forget to tell them about the hole in the trampoline or again, the dog or something dangerous on their property, and your child, they just don't know the difference, and they get injured. And so it's tough, but that does happen. But I will say, Evan, a person who's going to house a dog or have a trampoline or to invite people over should have insurance. And in those situations where the other party, right, and you've got a relationship with them either by blood or marriage or just friendship, hopefully you have health insurance, but that shouldn't prohibit you from still making a claim against their homeowners or liability coverage, because, if someone left something out and injured your kid, you don't want to have to explain to your child when they turn 18, hey, we didn't go after them because, they invited us over to a picnic the week before this happened. Because your child's going to say, well, I'm missing my arm, and you didn't want to go after their insurance because they invited you to a barbecue. So the wise parent will still pursue a claim to protect their child's interests. But when that kid turns 18, they still can bring their own claim if the parent have. But by then, most kids don't know what they're, so. Anyway, it's a tough thing to do, but we, as parents, I think as a society, we owe I don't think we do owe our children, everything we can, and so we need to protect them legally as well.
Absolutely. How do you approach cases where the injury could have long-term effects? We talked about it a little bit, but like scarring, developmental delays, psychological trauma. How does what's your approach in these kind of cases?
You need to be very intentional with those, and there's a lot of pediatricians, a lot of doctors out there who will advise you on what to do. And here's the tricky thing is, our kids, bless their hearts, they're not sometimes great at communicating to us, and sometimes they just lack the ability to, especially when they're infants,
Right.
to tell us what's going on. And sometimes a kid that hits their head or has a significant mental injury or even a physical injury, they change their behavior, but they're not able to articulate why they're changing their behavior, right? The kid isn't throwing the ball the same way they could, or the kid isn't, not able to stand on 2 feet. That sounds weird, but that happens. Or they had a crack in their skull or something happened, and it's hard to diagnose that. So I think you have to be really intentional with the doctors about that and not rush a settlement. And you want to be able to talk to the doctors you need to. If they have a head injury, take them to see a pediatric neurologist, right? Have them get some testing done. If they have an injury in their mouth, have them go to the dentist and say, look, I know these weren't permanent teeth, or maybe they were permanent teeth that just came in. And what's the long-term consequences of this? Are they going to still have issues when they're 18 or 20 or 40 or 60? And I think an honest doctor will tell you, hey, look, yeah, there's a chance. And then so you want to document through medical records and through written opinions of the treating doctors what the likely long-term consequences of this injury are going to be, and what are the costs, what are the likely costs. And sometimes you've got to get an economist to go through and say, what to reduce to present value, what's the future cost of this treatment? And if it's a serious injury, that number can be very high, right? We talked about that a kid who's young who gets a serious injury, they may have a permanent need for, healthcare for the rest of their life. And that number can be in the millions of dollars. So you don't want to quickly settle a case where you think the child may have anything close to a permanent injury, head or body.
Mm. And finally, Jordan, what's your advice to parents who maybe are afraid to make this a legal issue? We kind of talked about the family member or the friend or the neighborhood friend, but just in general, but they know their child deserves justice and care, but they're afraid to take that next step.
Yeah, and I get that. No one. Let me say this: very few people want to bring a legal claim,
Right.
but I think we have. We talked about this, but we just have a duty to our children to make sure that they're protected, and so just go talk to an attorney and just to figure out what the options are. I will tell you, a lot of the times, in fact, most of the times where someone comes to me and talks to me, we don't actually bring a legal case, right? There's nothing ever filed in a courthouse, or we rarely go to trial, statistically speaking. And but at least you'll be able to have the closure that, hey, I've done everything I can to help my child, who I think may have been injured because of the fault of someone else, and because we love our children, they are our future, they are who we are. We want to make sure that they're taken care of. So go talk to an attorney to make sure that you at least know what your options are and whether there may be a case to bring on behalf of your child, so that your child, if they do have a permanent injury, get what they deserve over the long term.
Awesome. Jordan, thanks again.
Yeah, thank you, Evan. Always love talking to you guys. We appreciate it.
Pleasure's all mine. And thank you all for joining us on Peachtree Injury Talk with Jordan Jewkes. To learn more or connect with Jordan and his team, visit jukesfirm.com. Don't forget to like and subscribe, leave a review if this information was helpful to you. Thank you so much.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.